So now we've done the basic information about pressure. It's time to move into the actual makeup of the larynx. And like usual, we're going to start the most deep into the tissue. We're going to start with, it has been bones so far, but in the larynx, there's really only one bone. And the rest is cartilage. So we're going to go with bones and cartilages. Okay, yeah, just like I said, we're going to talk about bones and cartilages. Couple important things to note. Remember, there's my note about the alien. Remember that abduct, vocal folds open, just like alien abductions taking people away. You're taking the vocal folds away from each other. So abduct the vocal folds. This part of the respiratory tract is about 1.5 inches long. The larynx, is the part of the respiratory tract that's 1.5 inches long. There's a couple non-speech functions that are carried out by the larynx as well. Mostly, we're going to focus on speech, but there's some other things too that we'll talk about as well. One is protecting the lower airway. So that's the epiglottis is going to close. This is usually during drinking, eating, swallowing, anything like that. The epiglottis will close over the trachea and help prevent food or drink from entering the airway. It's not just the epiglottis. It's also the vocal folds will adduct very tightly. Adduct, right? Because it's adding together. So they'll adduct very tightly. The epiglottis comes down. The larynx moves up and out of the way. And so all of these motions together both make a little room, extra room in the esophagus, as we talked about, but also help protect the airway from anything that you're eating, drinking, swallowing, etc. Also, coughing or expelling foreign material either from the throat or the airway. We'll talk about that later. And then also thoracic fixation for lifting. Remember in respiration, we said that the abs and the diaphragm will kind of push in, and that'll push on the lungs, and that forces the air out. Well, that means that your thorax isn't necessarily like fixed. It's kind of squishy and movable. And so if you're going to lift something, one of the things that's going to happen if you don't have your thorax fixed is you'll just kind of like bend down and then like blow out all your air instead of being able to use the thorax as like a strong point of leverage. So one thing that you can do is use the tightly adducted vocal folds, the epiglottis closing together, to keep air in the thoracic cavity. And then when the air is in the thoracic cavity, then you can use the thoracic cavity as a point of leverage and lift things and kind of push against that air-filled cavity as though it was a much harder area. So it helps you lift big things. We're not going to talk about that too much. That's pretty much as far as we're going to go into it. Now, aside from all of these non-speech functions, the larynx provides the phonation that we need for speech, laughing, crying, singing, yelling about bees. It all comes from the vibrations of the vocal folds. And if you've taken 375, or if you are taking 375, which probably most of you aren't because it's a class that tends to come after this, but you'll know that is the sound is all made by a glottal buzz, just a buzzing sound. And that's what the vocal folds do. We'll talk about it more in here. You'll also learn about it in 375, but that's what's happening in the larynx is this glottal buzz. Everything that we're learning about in this section, the cartilages, the one bone, the muscles, the vocal folds, how all of these things work together, it's all about the buzz and how we can change the buzz. So how do we put the vocal folds together to make the buzz, and how do we change the pitch of the buzz so that we can change the pitch of our speech? The buzz isn't the voice. the voice that you hear has gone through some molding, some articulating, some resonance, and we can't necessarily at this point consider this the voice. It's called the laryngeal source or the buzz. And it really just kind of sounds like meh. That's just what's going on down here. But it is what sets up everything that is necessary for speech. Okay, let's keep going. Here's a couple new important terms that we haven't really talked about. Cartilage is a firm tissue. It's softer and more flexible than bone, but it is a lot more firm than ligaments and muscles. Kind of like a bendy bone. The larynx is composed of elastic and hyaline cartilages, no fibrous cartilage. There's a few different kinds of cartilage. This isn't on the exam, so it's not all that important. Ligament, we've sort of talked about maybe a little, but ligament is going to connect like to like, so bone to bone, or cartilage to cartilage. And then there's also tendons. We've talked about a lot of these. Muscle to bone or cartilage. And then mucous membrane is one that we definitely haven't talked about yet. That is an important part of the larynx. There's a little line of mucous membrane right above the vocal folds that helps hydrate the vocal folds, so you don't get vocal nodules or any other kind of pathology when you're talking for a long amount of time. We'll talk more about it, but essentially mucous membrane is tissue that lines the inside surface, produces a lot of mucus to hydrate the tissue. There's a lot of mucus producing glands in these parts of the tissue. Like I said, we'll talk more about it. Okay. Where are we in space within the body? Let me move my head. And we're here somewhere between C4 and C6 is where the larynx is usually located. Very slightly higher or lower depending on people, but almost always right between C4 and C6. Great. It's not advancing because I'm not clicking in the right place. Okay. Seems like kind of a slide that I have that we don't necessarily need. The larynx consists of bone, cartilage, ligaments, and tendons, and it's soft and pliable in childhood, but becomes much harder and more rigid in adulthood. These are the real picture from a cadaveric study. This is the cartoon version of what you're looking at. The hyoid bone is the only bone in the larynx, the one bone. It's also the only floating bone in the body. We'll talk about that more. It's right here. Thyroid cartilage here, cricoid cartilage down here, and tracheal rings down here. It's okay if you feel like I'm going over these too fast because we're going to go way deeper into these in just a moment. Oh, look, that moment is now. So this again is just a... I've moved the wrong thing. Wanted to move my head. There we go. This is just showing you everything goes within the person. Here's all the different things. Hyoid bone, epiglottis, thyroid cartilage, arytenoid cartilages, corniculate cartilages. Those sit right on top of the arytenoid cartilage, cricoid cartilage, and how they come together within the larynx. Once again, this slide, not totally important because now is when we start the important things. So, where can I put me? I think I need to shrink. There we go. Hyoid bone. It's the only floating bone in the body. Floating means it's not connected to any other bones. It's only connected to cartilage, muscles. It's also the only bone in the larynx. So let's talk about the hyoid bone. There's not a ton of landmarks on the hyoid bone that you need to know, but there's a couple. And just to let you know, they're going to be a little annoying, and I'll tell you why. So here's the side view of the hyoid bone. This is the top. We've got towards the front, which we also call the body of the hyoid bone. This would be like right here. The lesser cornu. Cornu means horn. So this means the smaller horns. And they're towards the front of the hyoid bone. And then in the back, we've got greater cornu, which are the large horns. Those are in the back. Okay, so that's not too bad. The body, the lesser cornu, the greater cornu. Good. Lesser cornu are towards the front. Greater cornu are towards the back. That doesn't seem too bad. So why do I think you're going to get annoyed with this? Oh, well, here you go. Because in the thyroid cartilage, we've also got cornu. So let's talk about just these cornu on the thyroid cartilage really quickly. This is a side view here, but this is the top up this way. And then this down here is the bottom down this way. So you've got superior cornu here and inferior cornu here. So superior and inferior cornu on the thyroid cartilage, greater and lesser cornu on the hyoid bone. How will you remember it? The way that I come up with is hyoid bone, high. So up, right? So on the hyoid bone, everything is high. Everything is pointing up. There is no inferior cornu because everything's pointing up. Everything is superior. All the cornu on the hyoid bone are superior to the body of the hyoid bone. So that's why you have to have lesser and greater. We're just talking about the size of the horn because everything's pointing the same way. Everything's high. Thyroid cartilage, not so. You have some that point up and some that point down. And in that case, you can then use your normal anatomical directions. Superior meaning up and inferior meaning down. So hopefully that helps you. Now beyond the cornu, there's some really cool stuff going on with the thyroid cartilage. First of all, this is also, well, the notch, not the notch, but the prominence. So you've got the notch here that comes down where there is no cartilage. And then right here, you've got the prominence, and see that it sticks out a lot more. The prominence is what you call an Adam's apple in, usually men. But the thing is, anybody can have this, because it is just a feature of the thyroid cartilage. So it's not like a completely masculine or feminine feature. It's a prominence on the thyroid cartilage. Everybody has a thyroid prominence. Usually men's is a little bit larger due to the contribution of testosterone. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but it doesn't, anybody can have just like a larger prominence or not. So if you feel on your neck right here, the bump, which everybody will be able to feel this prominence right here. So you feel the prominence and then you kind of move your finger up just a little bit and you'll feel the notch. Right there. Then if you swallow like I just did, you can also feel how the larynx moves up and out of the way when you swallow. It's just kind of like an elevator, moves up a little bit. So you feel the notch, feel the prominence, you feel the notch. The angle is going to come down. The angle is everything just right below the prominence, the center line of the prominence that moves down. On the sides, we have a flat part called the lamina. There's one of these on each side, the lamina. And then, is there anything else we want to talk about? Oh, we've pretty much hit it all. Oh, facets. We should talk about facets. On the inferior cornu, the inside of the inferior cornu, you've got something called a facet, which is basically just like a socket. If you think about a bone has a socket where another bone fits into it. That's essentially what's going on here. You've got a facet because another cartilage is going to fit into the inferior cornu. What Here's another slide that talks about all the same stuff. Here we go. What cartilage is going to fit into the facet? The cricoid cartilage fits into the facet. Can you see it in this view? Sort of. So here's the thyroid cartilage in blue. Right here, here's inferior cornu coming down right here. The facet would be on this inside portion, and so it's fitting right onto the cricoid cartilage right there. Before I move on to the cricoid cartilage, I forgot to mention one thing. At the back of the prominence, on the posterior side of the thyroid cartilage, posterior side of the prominence, I think I said posterior. Not a real thing. Posterior side of the prominence. So right in here. This is where the vocal folds connect. Right there. We'll talk about that more when we get to muscles and ligaments, but that's essentially where the vocal folds connect. Okay. So the cricoid cartilage. Thyroid is the biggest cartilage. Cricoid cartilage is the smaller cartilage, and you can think about it crying because it didn't get first place. It's in second place for the second biggest cartilage. It also looks sort of like a ring, and in fact, it is the first tracheal ring. It's the only tracheal ring that's completely closed, and it's also the top tracheal ring. It's also one of the cartilages of the larynx. Okay, so let's take a look at this view of the cricoid cartilage. Looks like I need to move my head again. Here's a facet at the very top. So this is top of the cricoid cartilage. This is bottom. At the top of the cricoid cartilage, you have the facet where the... That's the wrong facet. That's for the arytenoid cartilage. Down here at the bottom of the cricoid cartilage, you have the facet where the inferior cornu connects to the cricoid cartilage. And then above that, there's another facet, and this is for the arytenoid cartilage, which means there's going to be another cartilage that sits on top of the cricoid cartilage. Before we go there, let's take a look at the rest of the body of the cricoid cartilage. So you've got this facet down here for the inferior cornu. You got this facet for the arytenoid cartilage. You've also got a lamina. That's towards the back. That's the posterior portion of the cricoid cartilage is where this lamina is. The lamina on the thyroid cartilage is in the front, anterior. Lamina on the cricoid cartilage is posterior, in the back. And then you've got something called an arch in the front of the cricoid cartilage. And that is what we need to talk about here. So let's talk about what sits on top of the cricoid cartilage now. Let's talk about the arytenoids. Forget about the epiglottis for now. Okay, we'll come back. We'll come back to it. So here's the arytenoids. They're the yellow guys right here. How are you possibly going to remember which ones the arytenoids are? Well, they're kind of shaped like an A, sort of. So don't forget that they're shaped like an A. Arytenoid cartilage, A, little guys that sit kind of pyramid shaped on top of the cricoid cartilage. They also look like candy corn. It's not really important, except that they do look like that. The corniculate cartilage sits right on top of the arytenoids, right here. This little nubbin is the corniculate cartilage. You can think about that like the white portion of the candy corn. When I give this lecture in person, we're usually at this point in fall semester. It's like getting towards Halloween. And so then it makes, I think about candy corn a lot. I like candy corn. I know it's an unpopular opinion, but it's good. Here's another thing. Here's an arytenoid cartilage with a corniculate cartilage on top. And even though it's not as close to Halloween as it is when I give this lecture in my in-person class, doesn't this look like a witch thumb? Yeah, I think so. Okay, so here's a view. Head's in the way again. There we go. Over here, in gray, this is actually a view of the epiglottis, but I like the side view here for the arytenoid cartilage because you can kind of see what's going on. So we've got a cutaway of the thyroid. Here's superior cornu. Here's the notch. Here's the prominence. This is the angle coming down. And it's cut away right at the angle. It's totally bisected. You can see how the cricoid cartilage fits up inside of the thyroid cartilage. This is where the inferior cornu would connect. And then up on top of the cricoid cartilage, like nestled within the thyroid cartilage and cricoid cartilage where they come together, are the arytenoid cartilages, which sit up top here. Again, these totally look like witch thumbs, sitting right on top of the cricoid cartilage. The facet there, every facet, allows for a joint. So there's a movement that's going to happen at this joint where this facet is, and there's movements that are going to happen at this joint too. These are important movements. We're going to talk about them in the video that comes right after this one. So let's take a look at this, the view of just these arytenoid cartilages and the corniculate on top. So first, let's talk about that. The corniculate cartilage is like it is its own thing, but it's totally adhered onto the arytenoid cartilage. So they start off as two independent cartilages, and then as you grow, they fuse together. Similar to the bones of the skull. Starts off, there's multiple bones of the skull that are kind of like independent of themselves, and they grow together over time. So that's what happened here as well. So we've got arytenoid cartilage, which stops here, and then you've got corniculate cartilage, but because they're fused together, you can think about them as like one unit, right? And there's two parts of the arytenoid cartilage that you really need to know about. Well, there's three. The corniculate cartilage is one. Well, there's four. Okay, there's four parts of the arytenoids that you really need to know about. One is the corniculate cartilage at the very top of the pyramid, the top part of the A. The other part is on the very bottom, totally opposite the corniculate cartilage. That's the facet, where it sits on the top of the cricoid cartilage. And then there's these two processes, the vocal process and the muscular process. Do I not have muscular? Oh, it's over here. So the vocal process and the muscular process. If I asked you, what do you think connects to the vocal process, what would you say? The vocal folds, of course. And you would be right if you said vocal folds. If you said anything else, you're less right. And then what connects to the muscular process? That's right, muscles. If you said vocal folds, all wrong. The vocal folds connect to the vocal process, and some muscles connect to the muscular process. So you can use your hands to create like a version of the arytenoid cartilages that do all the motions that you need them to do. You can do this on the exam. It's totally not considered cheating. It may flag you because you're doing weird stuff with your hands, but it's fine. I'll just approve it. Because it's a study tool. So what you got is, you've got vocal processes, those are your fingers, and you've got muscular processes, which are your thumbs. If you don't remember which one is which, muscles are cool. Muscles are cool. So you have thumbs up. Okay. So you've got vocal processes, muscular processes right here. Okay. And then your hands are going to swivel like this, and that's how the arytenoid cartilages swivel on top of the cricoid cartilage. Okay. So when you are going to speak or adduct the vocal folds for any reason, the vocal processes need to come together. So you have to swivel these arytenoid cartilages so that the vocal processes touch, basically. And that means that something is pulling on the muscular process. So you've got a muscle that attaches to the muscular process that rotates these so the vocal processes come together. And if you're adducting, then you've got a muscle that attaches to these that pulls backwards and pulls the vocal processes further apart. We'll go further into that when we actually talk about the muscles and which ones attach to your thumb to get that motion to work. But for now, that's what you need to know. And in addition to the arytenoid and corniculate cartilages, there's also something called the cuneiform cartilage. So here's, right here, this is the arytenoid cartilage, and right on top is the corniculate cartilage, and then kind of like a wishbone shape in a chicken, you've got the corniculate cartilage, or the cuneiform cartilage. But here's the thing. Not everyone has prominent enough cuneiform cartilages to see them in the tissue, but some people do. So what you're going to see, and we'll take a look at this in one of our slides when we're looking at the actual tissue, like what it looks like when you do an endoscopic exam of the larynx. You'll see bumps from the corniculate cartilages, and that's totally normal. It just kind of shows, it's like bumps in the skin. It shows you where the arytenoids and corniculate cartilages are. In some people, you might see a secondary set of bumps right next to them. So it's like, here's left and right corniculate cartilages, and you'll see that in everyone. And then on some people, you have these second set of bumps over here. How do I need to rotate my hands? There we go. The camera's flipped, and so it's not like a mirror. It's hard to figure out. Anyway, so then you've got these second set of bumps here, left and right. And when it's your first time seeing this, you may think, oh no, that could be cancer, because sometimes cancer shows up as bump, like a lighter colored bump in the larynx or anywhere else in the mouth. And that's probably not true if the bump seems to move right along with the corniculate cartilage. It's probably just the cuneiform cartilage. Again, I'll show you pictures of both people with and without visible cuneiform cartilage, and you'll see the difference. Of course, if you see like a lighter colored bump anywhere else, in a place that couldn't be the cuneiform cartilage, that's something to watch, because it could be oral cancer. That tends to be one of the first signs of oral cancer. Okay, before we go to the quiz and then in the video, we need to talk about the thing that we skipped over, which is the epiglottis. So here it is. Not a ton that we need to learn about the epiglottis, but I do need to move my head again. I didn't plan ahead. Good pun. For where my head was going to be in these slides, like I usually do. So here's the epiglottis. This is an actual view of the epiglottis. So we've cut through the cricoid cartilage right here, and we're taking a look at the epiglottis. The direction that we're looking here is, what's closest to us is the posterior side of the larynx, because the epiglottis connects on the anterior side of the larynx. So we're looking like this cadaver is facing away from us, and we're looking through the back of the neck into the larynx right here. So they've cut through the cricoid cartilage, kind of spread it open a little bit, and here's the epiglottis. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. Here's the cartoon version of the epiglottis that we want to talk about. Basically, the entire thing is body, except for this little area down here. This is called the petiolus, and that's what connects the epiglottis to the larynx. The petiolus. Everything else is body, and there's two surfaces to the body. One is called the lingual surface, and one is called the laryngeal surface. These are great names for these surfaces because it totally tells you where they are. The lingual surface is towards the tongue, and the laryngeal surface is towards the larynx. When the epiglottis comes down and covers over the larynx. Guess what? The laryngeal surface is the one that's covering over the larynx, and the lingual surface is up. And then when the epiglottis is up, the lingual surface touches the back of the tongue. So if you you don't have to try this if you feel like you're going to throw up. But if you don't feel like you're going to throw up, you can actually kind of like touch the top of your epiglottis by sticking your finger in your mouth, kind of like towards the back of your tongue. You can sometimes feel the epiglottis down there. And then if you move to kind of like swallow some spit, your epiglottis will move out of the way because it's moving down to cover over the larynx. So you'll feel it move. Again, this could make you throw up. Don't do it if you think that could happen. I mean, you're not in class. It's not like we're all in person, so I'm not going to just have like everybody throw up. But you don't want to throw up at home either. So just don't do it unless you know that you're probably not going to throw up. Epiglottal movement is kind of a mystery. It's not like a huge mystery. We just don't know quite exactly everything that's going on. So we know that there's movement of the larynx up and out of the way, and that can help push the epiglottis down. There's also something called the aryepiglottic muscular fibers, which we'll learn about when we talk about muscles, and those pull down on the epiglottis too. But when you sum up all those forces, there's something else that's moving the epiglottis that we just haven't identified yet. And this is why I say it's not like a great mystery. It's not like it moves and we don't know why. We kind of know 90% of what's going on, and then there's just like some other unidentified force or muscle that's moving the epiglottis. It's, it's anatomy. We've been studying it for a while. It's just cool that there's some things that are still left to find. And that's the epiglottis. Let's jump back to this quiz. So usually what I do in person is I will point to some of these and I'll have you answer what they are. You have the purpose games quiz, which is kind of like this, but we're going to do this anyway. Test your knowledge of where these are. And you also have a lab that you've done where you've like identified all these different areas. But go ahead and play along. What's this green cartilage? It's the cricoid. You might want to pause this before I give the answers. What's the blue cartilage? It's the thyroid. This white area up here, or yellow. Oh, you can't see my cursor. There we go. This yellow area up here. That's the hyoid bone. And the purple in the back, that's the epiglottis. Okay. What is this portion of the thyroid cartilage? Inferior cornu. And this is the notch on top and then the prominence below. And then the angle moves the rest of the way down. What about this area? It's the lamina. And then where is that located on the cricoid cartilage? On the back, on the side that we can't see. This portion of the hyoid bone, it's the lesser cornu, which means that this is the greater cornu. This is superior cornu. This is inferior cornu. Remember, these are high. They're all up like a crown. And these aren't, so superior, inferior. Okay, and then this is the angle of the cricoid cartilage. I think I forgot about that one. The arch. Not the angle, the arch. Right here. Arch anterior. AA, anterior arch. So that's how you can remember which one goes in the back and the front. There is no arch on the thyroid cartilage. But on the cricoid cartilage, there's an arch and a lamina. And then the lamina on the thyroid cartilage is opposite of the lamina on the cricoid cartilage. Okay, pretty good. It's not as easy to do it online, but that's okay. What are these yellow things? Arytenoid and corniculate. Good. Okay. So, here, let's do this. What surface of the epiglottis is this that we can see right here? That's the laryngeal surface. And down here's the petiolus, which attaches it to the thyroid cartilage. Also near the prominence, which is where the vocal folds are going to connect. So this will come down and close over top of the vocal folds here. Okay, that's it for bones and cartilages, and then we're going to move on to the joints next. Was not ready to hit stop. There we go.